Welcome to another edition of the Giants Huddle podcast brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the New York Football Giants. I am John Schmeelk. Today, a blast from the past. Former Giants beat writer, now with Sports Illustrated, co-host of the MMQB, Monday Morning Quarterback with Albert Beer podcast, the one and only Conor Orr. Conor, what's going on, man? Good to talk to you.
You too. How's everything?
So what years are you on the beat here?
Oh boy. 2012, 13, 14. So
Ooh.
it was like Odell. I remember being at the draft, Odell's draft at Radio City Music Hall and meeting his family. There was the rough start there, but then they kind of came like storming back a little bit towards the end of that season. Then the transition over to McAdoo. So it was a good time. I
Yeah,
enjoyed
so
myself.
you said, was it the 2012 season or were you around for the 2012 playoff run too?
No, so I missed I right after that. Like that off season into the following season. So, but I always tell everybody it's in the nicest way possible. Anything was better than the Jets beat. So
And even though the Giants didn't make the playoffs in 2012, they had a 10-6 not make the playoffs or 9-7 not make the playoffs for the Giants in
yes.
2012. So that was a pretty good year. And then 2013 and 2014 did not go very well. Though you did have the Odell Beckham stuff. So
That was fun, right?
Yes, that was fun. So Connor just had a great story come out on for Sports Illustrated. He spent some time with Russell Wilson at a park in Brooklyn, and it seemed like Connor, you guys didn't do a lot of like football talk necessarily, but it seemed like he really just his whole presence and personality really impacted you a bunch. Tell me about it.
Yeah, so Russell and I came into the league in air quotes, right? Russell's a football player, but he got drafted the same year that I started covering the NFL. We're the same age. We did a cover story back in 2020 during COVID when we both had kids at the same time. And so when everything came together for this story, I thought like it's a cool moment not to just revisit kind of where he is in his life, but where I'm at in my life and to talk about like, hey, this is how I feel. This is how my career is going. How do you feel like your career is going? We've all had ups and downs. What's that like? How do you do that as a dad? How do you do that as a husband? And so I find him to be kind of a really interesting thinker. He's definitely different than a lot of people, but I think misunderstood too. And so I kind of hope to bring that out a little bit in the piece.
Yeah, what I've learned about him since he's been here is that everything with him seems to be deliberate, right? Like
Hmm.
he does everything for a reason. There's thought behind everything he does. And I think that comes off to some people as though it's fake.
Hmm.
But I don't think it's fake. I just think that's the type of person that he is.
Right. And so that's really what I wanted to get to because the first time we did a cover story, I was really just enamored with that idea, right? Oh my God, how can someone think about everything and think it through and plan everything? And this time around, 5 years later, it's, well, why do you do that? What's the why behind it? And I feel like I got a really satisfying answer, which is one that I kind of haven't really read a bunch anywhere else. And that's that, he said before his dad passed, and sadly, this is a 15-year anniversary of his dad's passing, that he wrote him a letter kind of outlining his hopes and dreams for Russell's future. And Russell's dad, you have to know, was very self-critical of himself, right? And he was this tremendously successful person, but didn't always necessarily refer to himself that way. And so for Russ, he's saying, I don't know when my time's going to come. I'm going to write those letters to my kids. And so what do I want to be in it? And so how can I not live every moment like I'm writing something that's going to be in one of these letters for my kids? And I guess it kind of just hit me in a way that it didn't before, where I was like, wow, I guess if that's your life experience, why wouldn't you be the way that you are,
Yeah. So how do you think that's impacted the way Russ has gone about things and just kind of how he's attacked his football life?
Yeah, I mean, the football life, everything is, everything you put in your body, what time you wake up. I mean, what drills you're doing. I mean, I remember in 2020, talking to him about how he was evading people in the pocket and they purposely shipped some of the drills to the beach so he could run backwards and side to side because it's harder to do it in the sand and it makes it feel easier on game day, all that stuff, right? And to us, it probably seems so ridiculous to care to that level of minutia, but for him, it's the way that he's found comfort in his life, and the way that he likes to live his life. And so for me, it's, like you said, right? There's some people who look at it and they're like, this is sort of just a ham and cheese thing. Like, why are you going through your whole script before the game and acting like the crowd is cheering you on and stuff like that? But for him, it works. And we all have weird things that we do that work for us, you know?
So it seemed like it was an interesting conversation you had about how he is approaching this age 37 season, right? You talked about it and wrote about it in the article. This is now his fourth team in
Hmm.
5 years, and a guy who I'm sure he thought he was going to spend his entire year with the Seahawks, the same way Eli Manning spent his entire year with the entire career with the Giants. It didn't work out that way. So how is he thinking about moving on to the Giants this year? And just approaching the fact that he's now on the back end here at 37, though I'm not sure that's the way he thinks about it.
No, I mean, he said in 2020 that he wanted to play until his mid 40s. And I asked him if that was still the case. And he said, yeah. I mean, he said 5 more years from now. So that would put him at like 42 or 43. And for me, I think that he feels like he's in a good place physically. He said, like, he still throw the ball about 70 yards downfield, which is a lot. He still feels like he can evade rushers. And I would go back to the film last year because a lot of people were saying, oh, it's not the same Russ. But I started to kind of pick up on, especially at the end of last year, he's kind of doing what we asked him to do all along, which is like you don't need to
Yeah.
turn your back to the defense. You can step up and you can make those throws. And he's actually been doing it with a little bit more regularity. But I feel like that there's such an eagerness to pounce on this guy that it's like, oh, well, he's not the same person. Well, or maybe he's just evolving a little bit. And what happens if he just gets a little bit more efficient, gets a little bit better in the pocket? He might be able to see things a little bit differently, might be able to see things a little better. So I don't know. I think it's worth a shot, right? I mean, like, and that's the other interesting thing. I'm kind of rambling here a little bit, but I said to him, what about Denver? What about the end of Denver? What about Pittsburgh? And his response I thought was really interesting, which is like, why am I not allowed to have a career and everybody else is? Like, I had 10 awesome years or 11 awesome years and then like two bad ones. And if you go back statistically, like his awful years are like, middle of the road years for Drew Brees, or they're like some of the best years for Ben Roethlisberger, and but for him in particular, I feel like we kind of run out of patience a little bit faster, and I kind of thought it was interesting to point that out.
Yeah, I was kind of, Giant fans that some of them that aren't that excited about Russell Wilson, and they're like, oh, look what he did in Denver and look what he did in Pittsburgh. I'm like, guys, you realize this last year in Denver with Sean Payton, he had 26 touchdowns and 8 interceptions, right? Do you know the
Yeah,
last time a Giants quarterback
right,
threw for 26 interceptions, had only 8 interceptions? We're talking prime Eli Manning years. And frankly, I'm not even sure he ever had a 3-to-1 ratio. Eli was
right.
he was a guy that threw picks sometimes, which was fine. He was an aggressive quarterback. But I just think he's going to lift the floor of the position here to a higher level than what the Giants have really had over the past half a decade.
I think, and this isn't being unfair, I hope, to Daniel Jones, who I just think was in a rough spot at the
Yep.
end of his career, probably mentally, physically, all of that. And say what you will about Russ. Let's say that you're a viewing public and you believe that Russ is just kind of this non-real, like this fake person, whatever. Even that, like you're saying, from an emotional standpoint, is better than a guy who kind of had to rehab and to figure himself out, like Daniel, right? And I think that Daniel's getting that chance now somewhere else. Russell is going to come in and act in a dependable way. He's going to act in a way that you expect him to act. And for a lot of guys who haven't seen that before, I think that's galvanizing. I mean, you talk to the Jets guys last year, when Aaron Rodgers is in the building, you say what you will about Aaron Rodgers, but they adored his presence and his professionalism. And is he everybody's cup of tea? No, but he won a Super Bowl. He knows how it looks, and that catches on.
Yeah, and look, you talk to the guys here about Russell Wilson, and the amount of effusive praise that you get out of them for just spending what 2.5 months in the spring with
Yeah,
this guy, they're in love with him. And the thing that strikes me is that it almost to the point sounds scripted, but I know it's not, where they all say the same exact thing. He'll come up to everybody on the team, he'll talk to him, he tells you exactly what he needs, how he wants you to do it, and the communication and the leadership is just at another level. And this is coming from like defensive players too, not just guys on offense. And
right.
I know that again, to your point, the impression out there is that oh, he's doing the high knees and the plane. This is all a show. I can tell you, This Giant team is all on board talking to these players. He is universally adored in that locker room right now.
And again, like it's one of those things where even if it is, even like think the worst, even if it is a show, who cares? Because if two more guys buy in that wouldn't have before, that's two more guys that are buying in. Like I don't understand. Like so much of quarterback play is theater in the NFL, and it's carrying yourself a certain way. When
Yeah.
these guys are off the field, like I did a cover with Joe Burrow 3 years ago, and Joe acts a certain way and conjures a certain vibe. And I said, "What do you do when you're home?" I play video games until my eyes hurt. I sit on my couch and I play video games until my eyes hurt. He's a different person when he gets home, and that's fine. Like it works for him. And so I don't know. I mean, I always kind of found that argument with Russ really interesting, and I don't doubt that a lot of people are buying in.
Yeah, and look, it's funny because I had talked to Davis Webb, who is Russell's quarterbacks coach in
Sure.
Denver. And look, and we know that didn't go well, right? I think Russell will tell you that didn't go well in Denver. It didn't end well. When I talked to Davis Webb, he was the offensive coordinator at the Shrine Bowl 2 years ago. I guess that would have been 2024. And I asked him, how was Russ there? I've known Davis when he was here with the Giants. We have a good relationship. He would have been honest with me. This was off the record. And he's like, dude, he was great. I mean, he was a pleasure to work with. He did everything we asked of him. And we know him and Sean Payne, that wasn't the best deal
Hmm.
there. But the fact that that was still a really good relationship and it worked, I think it just shows you what a level of professionalism Russell Wilson is going to bring to the job.
Yeah. And that's it. Like that, this is, let's call it what it is. This season is you're rebounding from a difficult season. You need to wash the taste out of your mouth. You need to give the quarterback that you drafted in the first round some time. And you have, without question, the hardest schedule in the NFL. You need professionalism, right? I mean, you need a guy that may help you squeeze out a few more wins than you would have gotten otherwise. And he's the guy. Like, I mean, who else would you have wanted in that situation? And I know, obviously, you talk about guys like Matt Stafford, who I don't even think was really even available, for coming down to it, and Aaron Rodgers, and I don't know, I think Russell's right in there, right, in terms of a guy that could come in. Now Stafford's on a different level, obviously, but Rodgers coming in, or Russell coming in here, I mean, it's going to get you what you need.
Huddle up, get in here. If you're lined up here, you gotta go over the middle with it to score.
Right. How do we make that happen?
I don't know, but Citizens does. Make sense of your money with Citizens, official bank of Eli Manning.
And based on, you didn't do details on this in the story, but it seemed like when you guys were doing your little interview, and I know based on the picture, there was some cameras there shooting it too, that some kids just kind of came up to him and he started interacting with the kids. Like, how did that whole thing play out?
That was the part I joked. I was like that. I was like, this feels like like it's staged. But there was, so when you're shooting in New York City, the NYPD has to be there, right? And so
Yeah.
there's like an NYPD movie truck, and there are some really smart kids who were coming out of school, and they noticed the movie truck, and so they walked down to see, like, oh, who's the celebrity down here, and they just kind of made their way by and caught Russell's eye, and he 2 seconds later he's over there, asking them where they're going to college, giving them life advice, giving them autographs, playing catch. And I mean, Russell played catch with like half of New York City that day, like NYPD officers, like old people, like it was crazy. And so I really do think like part of the New York City thing is re-energizing him. He was a Yankees fan growing up. He spent a lot of time at Yankee Stadium since he's been here, and is kind of ingratiating himself. He hangs out with Carmelo a lot and is kind of talking to him a lot about his experiences here. And so, yeah, I mean, he seems revitalized, re-energized, and we'll see. We'll see what New York can do that to people too. It can do the opposite, right? But it can also make you feel good too.
Did he tell you what kind of advice Carmelo gave him? Because I think both guys are coming into similar situations, right?
Yeah.
Neither franchise was in a great spot when they got here. Melo was probably more in his prime years than Russ is now. But what were some of the things that Melo told him about dealing with the city? And frankly, I still think Melo is pretty universally loved by Knicks fans. There aren't that many Knicks fans that dislike him. I think he handled his time here pretty well.
I agree. And I just want to put on record very quickly that Philadelphia or Chicago are the hardest places to play in the NFL, not New York. We're not as bad as we get made out to be. I just want that
I
on
agree
the
with you.
record. Okay.
I think it also helps that there are two teams. So when something
Yes.
goes wrong, only half the city is coming after you.
That's true. And and both of them only have one, and maybe it's like I don't know how it works that way. But I think Carmelo's advice was this is the perfect, for Russell is a very narrative-based person. I'm going to tell myself a story that suits me and that's positive and that puts me in the right mindset. And for Carmelo, it's like, hey, this is the perfect place for you to rewrite the later chapters of your career. Where else, And I think that was really kind of the foundation of, not only Russell the player, but let's not forget, I mean, this guy's poured hundreds of thousands of dollars into every community that he's been to. He's been a staple at every children's hospital that he's been to. You can't take that away from him, regardless of how you feel about him. That's something that he's done that you can't take away. And so Carmelo is saying, this is kind of the perfect place for you to reintroduce yourself in that way to the whole world. And I think he's interested in that.
We're here in the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better. The Giants Huddle Podcast is brought to you by Citizens, the official bank of the Giants. From game day celebrations to your everyday financial needs, Big Blue fans can get the most out of every moment with Citizens. Learn more at citizensbank.com/Giants. Joined by Conor Orr of Sports Illustrated. Just did a great piece with Russell Wilson. Go check that out. All right, Conor, so what do you think this might look like for the Giants this year with a quarterback that's much more willing to throw the ball down the field than what they've had the last couple of years? A big-time wide receiver in Malik Neighbors. Brian Daboll, obviously a big year for him. What do you think this year looks like for them, as you mentioned, with a very difficult schedule?
I'm interested. Like, they just don't seem to be drafting and developing in a way that makes it seem like everybody's talking about this is, oh, well, it's do or die for Brian Daboll, which I think is kind of, and Joe Shane. And it's like, I think that's a silly way to think about it. I think this schedule again is really difficult. And so I think for Giants fans, like I would encourage them to get granular on this season, and to find the progress, and I know that's not exciting. And I know that you're going to need something, but if this team can at least be on the outer skirts of the playoff chase at the beginning of December, or let's say that there's an injury or two in the NFC East and all of a sudden this thing becomes a muddy mess like the AFC North does every year, just be involved, be in these games. And I think that Russ probably gives you the chance to do that. And he gives Daboll a quarterback who can move and throw downfield, which is what he had with Josh Allen, which I think that Daniel could have done, but I think his body just didn't hold up in a way that they needed to run the offense the way that they needed to. And so just be in games, right? You've got this incredible defense that if Abdul Carter evolves into what we think he can, and, I've been talking to people about him all offseason, if that's there, then your pass rush should be relentless. You should be more competitive in the early quarters, and the end of these games shouldn't feel like such a slog. And so I don't know. I hate to tell a fan base to be like, hey, get really into it that way. Like, I'm an Orioles fan and I'm like, I'm grinding on like, okay, what's the back end of our lineup look like in August? Because we're certainly not making the playoffs, but sometimes you have to adopt that mindset,
Yeah, I was joking on our Big Blue Kickoff live show last week, and I'm like, guys, you might not like the record, but the point differential, you hope that's a lot better. And I know fans are going to be
but
who cares about the point differential, Schmeelk? What are you talking about? But look, I think you make the point. There are too many games over the last couple of years where you're heading out of halftime, and you already know that the game's cooked, right?
Correct.
That happened way too many times, and I think. I was kind of explaining to fans, look, the Giants are playing the Chiefs in their home opener in week 3, right? Like, if they lose that game 27-24 because of a Patrick Mahomes fourth quarter drive, I mean, you shouldn't go home annoyed as a fan. I mean, it's the freaking Chiefs, right?
Yes. Yeah, I totally agree. And we've got this like all or nothing approach to fandom, which, I mean, by the way, I have like a little Giants fans. You got 2 since like 2007. Like, I grew up a Browns fan and I'm not anymore, obviously, but like it can get worse. So just be thankful for what you've got. You got 2 since 2007. It's pretty good. But I think it's just that when you lose sense of the big picture, you take away what's really fun about being a fan. It's like you might as well just be like in Madden and simulate the season towards the end and then give it a thumbs up or a thumbs down. Part of it's riding with this. And I think you're right, though. Part of it has to be at halftime, you got to go up and get your beer and you got to think, if a couple things break our way in the second half, we got this. And like they're playing in a manner that leads you to believe it's possible. And I think that to me is That's got to be what you bring to the table this season.
Yeah, look, I think it comes back to how we started here. It comes back to you got to score more points, right? You
Correct.
look at the Giants' offense the last 2 years; they just not score enough points to win football games in the National Football League, and that comes back to the offensive line play, which you've talked about here for a long time. Heck, you were talking about that when you were covering the Giants in 13 and 14, right? When Eli Manning was getting shellacked back there, left and
Yeah.
right. And can you just score enough points to give this defense a chance to rush the passer, right? Because if you're down 2 scores, you're
Correct.
finished. So, and then it comes back to Russell Wilson again. So, Brian Dable's an offensive guy. That to me is what needs to come together here to make this whole project work this year.
And not to take away, because I've been accused of being too soft on Dable over the years, and who I really like and I think is a good coach. But and so I'll say this. I mean, you look at the turnaround in Carolina towards the end of last season with the Panthers, right? That's the perfect example. That team was dealing with even less resources than the Giants have now. And they were competitive against the Chiefs. They were competitive against the Bucks. They were competitive against really good playoff caliber teams down the stretch. You need to look at least that good. And I think that that's possible because you have better players at almost every one of your key positions.
And I do think it's fascinating talking about this because we've seen it work in the NFL a bunch of different ways. But how do you work in the young quarterback? When do you work in the young quarterback? And I think the tricky thing for all of us is that once we get past the preseason and training camp practices, we're not in practices anymore, and we're never going to see Jaxson Dart play in a competitive situation. So the only people that really know whether he's ready are the coaches. And Brian Dable comes from Bill Belichick's school. He ain't going to tell us. So it's just going to happen, and we all kind of just have to trust that they know when the right time is because we're going to have no idea.
Yeah, and to use Bryce as an example again, like I was talking to players down there, and when they knew that he was ready to, because he got benched and then he came back, and when they knew was that the minute he was benched, he absolutely just started carving up the scout team when they put him on scout team, right? And it's like, okay, this is a dude. Just give him a minute to chill out, and he'll be fine. And I think we always rely on analytics, but so much of this is socio-emotional. There's going to be a moment that Brian Dable sees where Russ is maybe faltering a little bit, that Jaxson is just lighting people up in practice. It's going to happen because Father Time comes for us all, And when that moment comes, and when Jaxson displays the ability to say, like, hey, I know my protections on this play. I know how I'm going to check this down. I know where I'm going to go on this. I know here are my core concepts that I want baked in, and he can enunciate all that. You should put him in. You drafted him in the first round, but, everyone has to be patient because you put him in before he's ready. It's so much worse for him, and we've seen that bears out. There's hundreds of test cases on this now.
Yeah, I mean, do we think Bryce Young was better off or worse off because of his rookie year in Carolina?
So much worse. If Andy Dalton was there with Frank Reich during his rookie year, I think Frank Reich would still probably be the coach there. And I think that Bryce Young and CJ Stroud would be talking about him as neck and neck.
I completely agree with you. I'm with you on that 100%. And the other thing, too, to your point of him carving up the scout team, the players will know, too.
Exactly.
Because if you put the guy in before he's ready and the locker room knows you're going to a guy that does not give you the best chance to win, usually that doesn't end up going very well. So that's a very delicate balance and line the coach has to walk to make sure the team also believes in the guy when they decide to put him into the starting lineup.
It's the hardest thing for fans to understand because it's the one thing that we're not privy to, and that's what happens behind closed doors. Like what led to that decision? And it's not like one day, Brian Dable can come out there and be like, "Hey, the guys don't believe in Jaxson Dart yet," and just say that, right? I mean, he can feel it and he can read the room and he can have captains that can come in and tell him that. But there's kind of a dance to this all. And I think that for fans, that's the hardest thing is being patient. And that's why I thought, writing about Russ would be interesting because it's like, I think he's going to be around a little bit longer than people think he is. Like, I all the replies to the story were like, we'll see him after we won't see him in October. And I was like, I don't think so. I think you're going to see him in like November, but that's just me,
No, I'm 100% with you. I think we're looking, I think that's the time frame that I think is more likely. Every time I walk by ESPN, I feel like I see a lower third. When should Jaxson Dart play? And I'm like, we haven't seen him wear pads yet, guys. Like, we need to calm down a little bit and pump the brakes. But to your point, the last thing you want is you're in that Wednesday morning team meeting, right? Getting ready for a Sunday game. The coach tells the team, all right, we're going with Jaxson Dart. What you don't want is for like the group of, the Giants have a really good defensive line group, right? For those defensive line group to go into their position meeting and before the coaches go in, kind of look at each other and be like, oh boy.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is like, and like, all right, we're gonna have to carry this, guys. Like, that's not what you want. And knowing the way Brian Dable cares about quarterback development and Joe Shane wants to do this the right way, they're not going to do that and that's, by the way, why they signed Russell Wilson. So they wouldn't be forced into doing that before they are ready.
And Jameis Winston.
Correct.
Right? I mean, there's layers to this where you're buttressing yourself in case that there's an injury, and I really do think that the runway is a little bit clear for Jaxson Dart, and I think it's smart. As different as they are, I think they are all quarterbacks with a similar mindset on the field. Like, I do think that as players, there is a common thread there. But just let them learn. Like we have to be patient. We have to be patient because every time you microwave something, it just destroys the whole thing. And I think that there's been that cyclical attitude around here a little bit. Stop flying the planes over the stadium. That drives me nuts. Like, it drives me insane. It's like the biggest waste of resources in God's green earth. Like, the Giants will be fine. Just give them a chance.
It is funny. All right, let's go around the league a little bit. We know in the NFC East, I think it's 2003 was the last time we had a repeat champion in the NFC East. Every year, I can figure out a way to talk myself into how you could have a different winner. I got to be honest. I don't know if I see a path for a team other than the Eagles winning the NFC East this year. Do you?
Yes, I think it could be the Commanders. And I think that's based on we just, the reporting that we do in the offseason and the people that we're talking to. And at first, I was so down on Washington. And I thought, they're a perfect example of a team that's going too fast in their rebuild, right? Let's go get Deebo Samuel. Let's go get Von Miller, guys with known personality issues. And you have Jaden Daniels, who's kind of a sweetheart of a guy over here, and you're interrupting his ability to figure it out, right? But I think that what we are underestimating is how much Cliff Kingsbury's evolved, how much he's grown as a play caller, and his ability to, we don't talk about him with the McVays of the world. Like, we kind of write him off as an air raid guy and like, okay, go get over there in your corner. What we don't realize is that he basically built a really amazing non-air raid offense in Arizona, went to USC, and now put it all together in Washington. If that thing evolves, I think that the league is going to be on its heels for a while. And so that's why I would say the Commanders at least have a chance. I'm picking the Eagles to go back to the Super Bowl, to be clear, but I think the Commanders are my other, that's the other option there, right?
If you want to know how to manage 2 minutes of crunch time football, I'm your man. But if you're wondering about a long-term financial plan, you should talk to Citizens. Hey, I can also talk lawn care.
I'd like to learn about a mowing routine.
Yes, I knew I could help. Make sense of your money with Citizens.
It's funny. I did not love the Kingsbury hire, right? I didn't think he did a great job in Arizona, but it seems like now that that's all he's worrying about and he doesn't have the head coaching duties, I thought he was fantastic last year with the Commanders. I'm with you. But I got to be honest with you. Their defense scares the heck out of me, man. I know they just signed Von Miller. I mean, I don't know how much he has left in the tank.
Yeah, we'll see.
But, boy, you look at their secondary, Bobby Wagner at some point has to start not playing really well, right? And they don't have a pass rusher, really. I mean, there's a lot of holes on that defense that Dan Quinn's going to have to figure out a way to patch.
A lot of holes. And again, Dan Quinn was great in Dallas because he did not have to coach the entire team. And now that you're worried about a rookie quarterback, now that you're worried about, this Commanders thing took off so fast. And as a CEO, he's going to be pulled in a lot of different directions. Can he be in that defensive room for as long as he wants to and for as long as he can make an impact? And I think that's a big question,
Do you have a team that you think everyone is sleeping on too much in the NFC this year that could make some noise that nobody expects?
I don't know about nobody, but I think the 49ers are going to go to the conference championship game. And
wouldn't shock me.
Right. I mean, this is what they do. They have a down year with Kyle, but they'll have a really down year. And then they'll get guys like Nick Bosa out of it. And then all of a sudden they come back and they're just destroying people. But I think we're way underestimating the fact that they traded away other running backs. They think that Christian McCaffrey is really healthy again. And that's a game changer. Not only that, but Ricky Pearsall is going to get a year better. And Robert Saleh is the perfect person for
He
Kyle
is.
Shanahan. And to have him back in San Francisco, I just think we're underplaying that so much. I'm not a gambling person, but I think that their over-under was like 9 wins, 9.5 wins. I was like, why isn't this off the books in Vegas right now? They're going to win 11 games this year.
You mentioned Pearsall. I think he could have a monster second year. Brandon Ayuk's coming off the injury. Now we have Juwan Jennings, who says I want a contract extension. I'm out. They traded Debo. I mean, him and Kittle are kind of like the last two guys standing here.
Yeah. Yeah. No, but I think it's one of those things where you need to do it. And what did everybody say about Buffalo last year? You're out of your mind getting rid of Stephon Diggs and getting rid of all these vets and cutting all these guys. And what we saw was Khalil Shakir grow into a receiver who deserved a long-term extension. I still think there's a lot of room for him to grow. He's one of my favorite receivers in the league. You saw guys in the backfield there develop and just turn into like really good players that are doing what Josh Allen wants them to do. That's the secret, right? And I think this is about building around Brock. This is about giving him the chance to be comfortable. And the core of this team is still really good.
And I'm happy that's a team that's on the Giants' schedule. They also play the NFC North, which I think you could argue, Connor, might be the best division in football, though you can obviously talk about the AFC North in that conversation as well. How do you see that shaking out? How much of a step back do you think the Lions take, losing their two coordinators? And can the Bears make a little bit of noise with Ben Johnson moving over from Detroit?
Right. I think every year we go into it, like I think this happened with the AFC West a couple of years ago, and then the AFC North, and then the AFC in general, where we were just like, oh, this is a gauntlet, right? And this is going to be impossible. And then it never lives up to our expectations, And I think that's probably the NFC North this year, to me, right? Where Green Bay had a good year last year, but they fell apart in the playoffs versus the Eagles. I think you saw the distance between them and someone like Philly. They did not upgrade their defensive interior at all this offseason, which was befuddling to me. They still have wide receivers practicing at cornerback. Like there's some deficiencies there, right? And they went wide receiver heavy in the draft, which I didn't think was the biggest position of need for them. I could be wrong, but like, are they going to get to 11 wins again? I don't think so. Probably not. The Vikings are effectively starting a rookie quarterback, and as good as they were last year, and you could say, well, maybe JJ McCarthy and Sam Darnold are as good as each other. Maybe not. And it's also really hard. Brian Flores knows this, and talk about Russ, the Legion of Boom knows this. So much harder to maintain a generational defense than offense, right? And so can Brian Flores do it again? That was as big of a reason for their success as anything. So, and then you got the Lions, who lost both of their coordinators, lost their center, who was kind of the heart and soul of that offensive line. They've had to do a lot of turnover in the offseason. So I will never doubt Dan Campbell, but the idea that four of these teams make the playoffs, I think we're getting a little ahead of ourselves.
No, I'm with you on that. And I always told the Giants fans, as tough as the NFC East is gonna be this year, just be happy you're not in the AFC, where you got to deal with Josh Allen, Patrick Mahomes, Lamar Jackson, Joe Burrow. Oh, and Justin Herbert's there too, by the way.
Yeah.
And they also just had the first overall pick in the draft in Cam Ward, who might end up being really good.
Yeah.
Like, damn. I mean, that's tough, dude.
I know. And the fact that, I mean, like if the Ravens were in the NFC, I think they would have had 3 or 4 Super Bowls by now. And I think that just is a reflection of how deep and how competitive and how tough that division, that conference is. And so, yeah. And I mean, look at the West. You've Sean Payton, Andy Reid, Pete Carroll. I mean, that's ridiculous, and Mike McDonald, or I'm sorry, not Mike McDonald, but and Jim Harbaugh. And that's one of the greatest collection of coaches in a single division in NFL history. And so there's just a lot of talent. There's a lot of talent from top to bottom.
No, it really is. And the Giants get the AFC West. Do you think the Raiders can make a little bit of noise there with Pete Carroll and Geno Smith? And, just think about it. Carroll, we know how good he is. And then on offense, you have Geno with Genti and Bowers. I know there are some questions around those three, but that is a pretty good place to start.
It's a good place to start, and they got the Besh kid from TCU, who I think is really talented, the wide receiver. I think he could almost be that Lad McConkey, like I'm gonna gobble up 100 targets in a season kind of guy, and be a really reliable guy for Geno Smith. But the secret weapon there, I think, is Chip Kelly, and everybody is saying, okay, this guy flamed out in the NFL. Well, he won double-digit games in 2 seasons, and kind of was just not emotionally ready for the job, and got fired after his one bad season. Then the 49ers thing is ridiculous. But if you look at what he has done since then, and how coaches still revere him offensively. And then he went from no huddle, no huddle, no huddle to calling, I think, some of the fewest plays in the NCAA with Ohio State last year in their title run. He is evolving. He can always change. And he just loves zeroing in on designing offenses and calling plays. Like, that's what makes him happy as a person. I think he's in his bag right now. And I think that they're going to sneak up on a lot of people.
Does anyone figure out Patrick Mahomes and keep the Chiefs out of the Super Bowl this year?
Well, it's like, we had this conversation about Tom Brady for 20 years, and it just felt like, how many times can we say if you get to him with a pass rush, he's not going to be good, right? Or as good. And that's been the truth. It was the truth in the COVID Super Bowl against the Bucs, and it was the truth in the Super Bowl last year against the Eagles. If the offensive line falters and there's not enough going on for him immediately in front of him to be able to get rid of the ball, you're going to be able to win some games and you're going to be able to beat him. But I think they did a good job this year, drafting for offense, getting the guy from San Francisco in free agency. And so I think they're going to be right back in the conversation.
All right, final question, Connor. Give me one big thing or storyline that you're tracking during training camp leading up to the season that you really think could impact the year this year in the NFL.
That's a good question. I would say, speaking of Chip Kelly, let's see how many more teams are adopting a college-style no-huddle offense as we come into this year. Let's keep an eye on that. I think that'd be interesting.
Why do you think that's going to be a trend?
I think we are at the point now where we are so saturated with young quarterbacks, and the league is just turning over. And I think it's probably just more advantageous. And if you look at the league like cyclically, right? Like the Eagles, it was the Patriots in 2007 with the one word play calls, and then that came and went. And then the Eagles came and did it, and then it came and went. And a lot of teams are going big and heavy and power because they're trying to copy the Eagles. And so what is the zag to that? And there are going to be some teams that just have no choice. Their offensive line isn't going to be big enough, right? Their running backs aren't going to be good enough or healthy enough, and you're going to have to come up with some sort of a counterpoint. And so it's like a wild shot in the dark, but I'm like, let's think about that.
I like that. I'm tracking the other side of that, what you just talked about. I think we're seeing kind of football slowly reverting back to what we saw around like 2005, 2006, where all these teams are playing these, shell coverages, whether it's, cover 2, cover 4, cover 6. And I think teams are realizing, do you know how you beat those coverages? By running the football. And I think I'm curious to see how many more teams start to lean into the run game a little bit more, where it's like, all right, it's either deep chunk play, but if you can't get those, then you run the football. And that maybe is becoming more efficient than the short passing game, which became so in vogue, 5-6 years ago.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of this stuff is dying out just based on how the defenses around the league are covering it. And the other part of it too is like what Brian Flores did with the Vikings was, and put on tape for everybody, was we're short-circuiting your communication. And so we're understanding what you're doing pre-snap, and then we are going to put guys in places where we know it's going to mess you up. That just makes a pass such a hard task to complete. It's like, why wouldn't you just run the ball? Run the ball until they put 9 guys in the box.
Yeah, and the other fun part of it too is that, it was such a zone run heavy league. I think we're also seeing teams go away from that, right? We're seeing a lot more gap scheme stuff, more duo. I think teams figured out how to deal with the outside zone run finally, and now, by putting a lot of fast, how many 225-pound linebackers are starting in the NFL now? When Landon Collins came into the league, that's how much he weighed as a safety. And how these guys are middle linebackers. So I think just more power run game, and see how defenses now kind of zig to that zag.
Passing games were so extravagant for so long, and now you apply that extravagance to the run game. Like you watched Notre Dame last year, they had a quarterback who literally couldn't throw the ball, and they made it to the national championship game based on, because you're borrowing from the academy, you're borrowing from Kyle Shanahan, you're borrowing from Sean McVay. It has to be that diverse. An offensive line needs to know 5 or 6 different schools of thought.
Connor, tell the folks about everything you're doing, anything you want them to know about, pods, written content, you name it.
Yeah. SI.com and Sports Illustrated, the magazine. I'm hearing a lot of people subscribing again, which is good. Get to a newsstand, you buy it. It's a lot of fun. You're not staring at a screen all the time. And then pods, we got the MMQB podcast, on the Sports Illustrated network with myself and Albert Breer, and just everywhere. Right, we're going to be talking about football on every platform imaginable for the next 8 months. Isn't that amazing? It's great.
I mean, the first game is less than 2 weeks away, man. I mean, it's
Woo!
it's crazy. We're getting there. It's fun. Connor, this was a lot of fun, man. Let's catch up soon. If you come out to camp, we'll have you on again. And let's stay in touch, my friend.
All right, looking forward to it.
Conor Orr from Sports Illustrated on the Giants Huddle podcast, brought to you by Citizens, official bank of the Giants. We'll see you next time from the Hackensack Meridian Health Podcast Studio. Keep getting better.